Good morning, Noel. Good morning, everyone. I'm a Nigerian and I'm very privileged to be here amongst you. This is not my first or second time. This has been an awesome time in Power Monday, and this is a privilege to be welcoming the guest speaker for the day. Mr. Samuel Washira is a highly accomplished banking professional with extensive expertise in credit origination and relationship management, corporate banking, and debt structuring. As a senior credit origination manager of Stanbic Bank Kenya, he manages a credit portfolio valued at 11.5 billion Kenya shillings, driving a strategic financial solution for diverse clients. Previously, Samuel held key positions at Kenya Commercial Bank, KCB, including acting head of Chinese business and senior relationship manager for infrastructure, where he successfully managed multi-billion shilling portfolios and structured financing for large-scale projects. He holds an MSc in Money, Banking, and Finance distinction from Middlesex University and a BA in Economics from the University of Nairobi. He's also a certified public accountant. Please, Power Monday, it is a privilege to make welcome our speaker, Mr. Samuel Washira. You're welcome, sir.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that introduction, and I'll put my presentation as we start. We want to discuss Pan-African payment systems and understand how that helps our businesses, why that has been brought into this space by the various countries that are participating, and how it can benefit us. So let me just put my presentation on. Okay, so I hope everyone is able to see the first slide.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So when Paul asked me to discuss the Pan-African payment and settlement system, I was keen to also look at how this platform that was brought in by the various players in the African market through the efforts of AFCA, that is the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, and Afreximbank, which is one of the banks set up through efforts by Africa Development Bank to try and facilitate trade within Africa. And the two of them looked at how they could promote intra-Africa trade and make payments in local currencies and promote trade within Africa, especially within the small businesses that were growing. The idea was to try and see how do we then ensure that there is more trade within Africa. And there's a long history to trade in Africa, which started many years ago, but was disrupted by all these boundaries that were created after colonial period and a slowdown in trade as most countries then started to look within to do their own activities. So AFCA is a big organization under AU, and it helps to promote trade. So all the 55 member states of the AU are members of AFCA, and Afrexim being one of the supranational banks that helps to promote trade and credit, also serves the role of a credit agency to promote trade, came together to put together what we call the Pan-African payment system. And it is not a unique system. If you look at what it does, it just tries to promote the agenda for African countries so that there is more trade between the countries. And the unique thing about its logo, the one placed on the right corner up above, it represents cowrie shells, which Africans used to as a currency many years ago among the other items that they were trading. So moving away from barter trade, the cowrie shells had been adopted as a currency across most communities in Africa as they were trading with each other. So it basically, if I could move to the next slide and explain a bit more about it, it basically has been adopted by a number of central banks across Africa, including Central Bank of Kenya, uh, Central Bank of Nigeria, Ghana, uh, Egypt. There is quite a number of banks also joining, and the reason the central banks join this is to also help with regulating and promoting the, the platform. And they also help to onboard banks from within their countries that are joining this system so that they can then promote Africa trade and the mandate under Africa to try and make sure that the economies in Africa are reliant on one another and make great strides in growth. A unique thing also about the system is that it uses the local currencies. So behind the transactions that are done, there are obviously then exchange rates maintained from the system, but it saves countries the burden of having to transact in different currencies that are not the currencies of operating within the individual countries. And this is a significant benefit because right about 2021, 22 period, a lot of countries had struggled with foreign currency reserves, and it impacted a lot on the trade within different countries. So if you needed to import goods as a trader, you would then be required to book dollars with your bank or euros or any other foreign currency. And this slowed down trade quite a bit. And with platforms like PAPSS, it helps African countries then to trade without having to worry about the details of what what happens in between there, what currencies are required, and how these are settled. The other thing is that it is also uh, faster because it tries to focus on direct transactions from one bank to the other. But of course, behind it, there's a complex network of verification and validation processes that happen before the payment is settled. But the platform has been promoted as one that allows instant settlement of payments between the transacting parties. The platform was launched in 2022 January and has continued to gain a lot of popularity with a lot of people in the market. And it has picked up faster with banks and institutions. There are various institutions, not just banks, the likes of what we call switches, who switches are interconnections that are used to conduct transactions. There are a number of them that exist within the network of PAPSS, which then terminate the transactions to the different banks. West Africa has been active on the platform, and this is possibly because when you look at how payment systems work, there are a number of other regional payment systems that exist. And not to forget that we also do have the SWIFT platform, which is global. And this also helps to still complete transactions within the countries that are member states. For example, if you have banks that are not members within PAPSS, then you end up having to do the transaction via SWIFT or a regional platform. Some regional platforms, for example, for East Africa, we have the East African Payment System, which has the East African countries of Kenya, Uganda, Rwanda, and Tanzania, which transact on the platform. And they then have the advantage of using a localized platform. So for EAPS, it's also a platform that uses local currencies. So you can transfer Kenya shilling, uh, use Kenya shilling and transfer to Uganda and get Uganda shilling on the Uganda side. And the various countries across the member states allow for this to terminate in their local currency. So for EAPS, this is managed through the auspices of East Africa Community, and the central banks of East Africa, who are the member states, have then endorsed the system, and the central banks run this system. Um, we also then would relate systems such as this, for example, to the local system, which is the CAPS. And basically what that does is it interconnects local banks. So the the PAPS system is a similar platform, but now aimed at all African countries. So it then customizes its usage to transactions that spread across the region. It uh, has made sure to promote instant payments compared to SWIFT, which takes about 2 days on average between different parties from the country of origination to the country of the recipient. And say, for example, if you want to do the transaction in USD and SWIFT, it then requires to pass through a bank in the US, which then transfers to another bank where the recipient has various accounts that are maintained. So what happens is, because you do not have physical movement of funds, various banks are required to keep reserves of funds and accounts called nostros and vostros, which are internal accounts for allowing transfer of funds. So this never gets to the front end for the client, but a lot of regulations happen behind the scenes. So for your bank to transfer USD, it requires to keep uh, those reserves or have aligned with a foreign bank with that amount in place to enable the transaction to go through. So with PAPS, this then becomes easier because this exchange and transfer processes can be managed using local currencies and customized arrangements that suit African countries. It also is promoted as a cheaper platform. So where you find on Swift, on average, you pay about the equivalent of $20 to $30 per transaction. This is expected to be cheaper. So far, I would say from my research in Kenya, there are two banks that have put this up, and a number of other banks, and that was within this year. A number of other banks are expected to come on board in 2025, and this will then widen the amount of trade happening. I think the fact that East Africa already had a platform has helped the East African countries to continue trading and promote trade within each other. And as we move to a Pan-African context, even within East Africa, then this system will then come in and help to grow the number of players within that system. Uh, and so apart from saving on time, it saves you money, and it also helps to create confidence between different African countries that have the opportunity to trade with one another. Okay, so how does it work? We've already spoken a bit about this. So you'll have your bank on one end where you initiate the transaction, and you then need to talk to them and check if they have the PAP system. And if they do, they will check the receiving institution is also on the system. And then the transaction is initiated and checked through the PAP system for validation and instructions. And then this is then forwarded to the beneficiary's bank, and the beneficiary is able to receive funds through their account. So most of us are familiar with different types of transaction systems, for example, even on mobile money. So it's a similar process. A number of banks, mainly around West Africa from my research, have been able to put this payment system onto the online banking platforms. And it's possible that this will be the way forward because most banks are now trying to do transactions online. And it also probably will be good to say that at this point, there are many other platforms that are promoted possibly by banks that are Pan-African. For example, the likes of Stanbic and a system called Borderless. But then you find the advantage for PAPS is that it covers more banks. So as we have all these other platforms, they could be cheaper. But then if the person you're paying is not within a particular platform that you intend to use, the cost may go up. For example, for transactions that are not within member banks, then you'd probably end up having to use SWIFT that will have a higher cost of the transaction. So this diagram shouldn't create any complexity. What happens behind the scenes is usually left to regulators and the systems to execute, and this build a lot of protection so that the system are able to check whether the money has been received, whether the accounts have been provided correctly, and where funds are not received, there is also mechanisms for checking what could have caused a delay, and the bank is able to give you feedback. So if, for example, you missed a digit or made an error on the account, then you'd be able to get a message telling you that the money has been received back by your bank because of an error with the system. So that's basically the behind the scenes of that system, and we can then just look at the features to see how these works. So we've spoken about how it works. It's important to check with your bank and see that it has the PAPS system. It's a member of the network. And then if they haven't integrated, there is an ongoing process right now for many banks to join and become partner banks that can then transact under PAPS. And then looking at the features, just trying to put the next slide. Okay. Okay, the next slide is refusing to come on. Maybe a system issue, but I'll just make comments around the features. So it is instant. You do a transaction and it performs that immediately. Probably I'd say maybe in about 5 minutes, you should see the transaction reflect in your account. It supports different currencies and reduces dependence on foreign currencies beyond Africa, such as USD and Euro. And it reduces the transaction time for the traders and parties that are trading. And it also is intended to make trade between partner countries faster. So if you find that the transactions you do across the business that you are doing are with a country in West Africa or the southern side or any other African country, there is also likelihood that AFCA has other propositions meant to promote trade. And as you use the system, there is also the need to check whether there is any tax exemptions between the country you're trading with or where you're exporting or importing from. And as the business grows, because Afrexim finances exporting and importing between African countries, you will then have the benefit of being able to enjoy trade facilitation and promotion of trade by these two agencies. And the the process then helps you to grow, and it promotes you to becoming a Pan-African business and grow your business to the levels that you would like to desire. And yeah, in summary, that's what Pan-African payment system is and how it helps promote local businesses, make your business Pan-African before it can consider going global. And I do believe African business possesses all it takes to grow to that level. Uh, I would like to welcome any questions on just an understanding or any other area around transfers and even general banking, possibly just to widen understanding. Thank you.
Thank you very much, friend. I think that this is good. Now, you mentioned other systems like EAPS, the East African one. You've mentioned,
Yes.
yes. So the question is, are all the banks in there, and does it mean that from my bank, I would be able to pay somebody in, say, Tanzania, from maybe an online platform, or generally, what do I need in order to initiate these payments?
Okay. So for initiating the transaction, you'd need to then open an account with a member bank. Uh, and it's good to mention, I've seen somebody ask which two Kenyan banks are these. There is Access Bank, which is also Pan-African and has origins in West Africa. There's also KCB that did so recently, very recently, within just the current month of March. And that shows how recent this is for most of the Kenyan banks, while we have many more banks in West Africa, including like my employer Stanbic across Ghana, Nigeria, and all the other West businesses. And so to do the transaction, you'd open an account with a member bank, and then they would, like you've seen most forms, you pick whether you want electronic fund transfer. They'll probably implement a choice where you select you want PAPS. But say, for example, if you're doing the transaction across East Africa countries, then you'd select the EAPS and put the details of the bank you're sending money and the account. So they've made it easier nowadays. Before, you'd have to put a lot of codes to identify that bank. But if you're able to select the mode of payment is EAPS, then you select that you'd like to pay to a certain bank, and this is the account. The systems are now able to coordinate behind the scenes, and the details will be captured, and you'll get a message, what they call an authenticated message once the funds are sent, confirming that funds have been transferred to the other bank. So with this message, in case of any queries, the beneficiary can also pursue this with the other bank, just to ensure that these funds have been received and or checked for if there is a delay, or sometimes you find, and it's good to mention, there are restrictions on the amounts that are traded. Uh, so if you are, for example, trading an amount above $10,000 in Kenya, you will be required to provide supporting documents to confirm the purpose for which the funds have been received. So this could be invoices, and then any other documents showing that you have probably, if it's not an invoice, a contract, or a document that supports the transaction that you are carrying out, so that the bank can meet regulatory requirements for transfer for huge amounts. So yeah, that's how it's done, Peter. I'd seen a number of questions. I'll just try and see if I can pick the first one. So the two banks, I think I've covered the two banks. Technical and financial requirements for an institution to be on PAPS. Yes, I had expected this question. What I could probably say is PAPS is still very early stages with CBK. But I do know that CBK will undertake certain requirements, regulatory, capital, and then also check security features. This is a much more technical discussion, but I know that it is something that can be found through the CBK. I may not manage to get the full detail of that, and but possibly I know CBK would have the detail of that because they're helping to onboard the Kenyan banks. Yes, I also see the comment on SWIFT has a long turnaround time. So the invoice takes long to be paid. That's quite true. So we have a scenario where if you're doing SWIFT, you can imagine if you want to pay, for example, to Botswana, possibly the invoice is in USD. The transaction will then have to go through a US bank, which contacts another US bank that banks the bank in Botswana for the transaction to then be completed. So it's usually a longer process. On average, what we see is about 2 days to complete that. There is a question about errors. So what happens?
The person making that comment has also added a question that, do I raise an
Yes.
invoice in CASE or in BWP? The one talking about SWIFT. You see the whole statement.
Okay.
Yes.
So what PAPS intends is because you're paying in the local currency of the beneficiary, you go to your bank and tell them the amount you intend to put into the account of the beneficiary. So if it's BWP, say 20,000, you tell them I'd like the beneficiary to receive 20,000 to the account. And they will tell you how much you need in Kenya shilling to make the payment on this side. So it eliminates the need for you to convert and struggle with the process of exchanging. So that is done by the bank on this side. Yeah, hope that has clarified. And then the question
Sorry,
about, yes.
sorry. There's one Vince who has sent me a message. I know he was trying to send it on the chat, but he sent it to my private chat. Can you transact through the mobile wallets?
It is possible through mobile wallets if you have, there are various switches that are connected. For example, if you look at the Kenyan side, we have PesaLink and InterSwitch. InterSwitch is known mostly for ATMs. There's also KenSwitch, which helps banks to interconnect through ATMs as well. So it's not only banks. So you will find certain providers who are able to terminate a transaction. For example, PesaLink could help to interconnect to the accounts for the various individuals, because what PesaLink does, it simply uses your bank account to complete the transaction. So I may not be familiar with the PesaLink and the switches, but this is an area that is evolving rapidly. And you may find that if the party on the other side paying you, for example, if it's Nigeria, is able to ask their bank to transfer and use PesaLink from their end. If they have that on their side, then it's able to get the payment to reach to your account. And this will be done through PesaLink as the party to complete the transaction to the account which you operate. So that was part of the institutions that we had put up among banks. There are a number of switches, including the East African one, which I've mentioned, and there is a number of them in West Africa as well. So hopefully that can be resolved by talking to your bank to find if they're able to use PesaLink, because PesaLink, if you're transferring to Kenya, will be able to reach any account in any bank.
And the most affordable in my own experience. I love it.
Yes, yes. So it would probably be also a scenario where maybe if this was to grow, you find some of the mobile networks would likely join, but I think I'm yet to see a name for any mobile service provider who is able to do the parts. But with globalization, I think eventually what happens is a lot of institutions end up joining these platforms, and as they become popular, they start to fade in the background. What you just see is you've received money. How it has reached you uh, starts to disappear. So you do not get to know the details behind the transaction, but your bank or your provider will be able to tell you you have received money. Um, just like you'd probably see happening with entities that send money from abroad, such as the Western Unions and MoneyGrams, and of late, people like Wave, and there is the transactions that happen behind the scenes, and they could involve a multiple number of arrangements that facilitate funds being received to your account.
Mhm.
Yes. Have I
Yeah.
missed any questions or?
There is somebody who asked a couple of questions, but I know some of them may not be relevant to you. Uh,
Yes.
yeah, there is a question that you spoke about error. Kindly shed light. I don't know if you spoke about error. Kindly shed light on PAP's cybersecurity model you use in reference.
Okay.
Mm,
So I will confess I'm not a security expert,
yeah, yeah,
but I do handle a lot of client transactions, and I then get to know because of what happens sometimes. I get to know what they are all about. So in terms of the security that these systems operate, I do know they have very closed systems. So the secure messages that are sent between one party to the other go through a system that is managed by, for example, the PAP system. It will then receive that and carry out various authentications to check the message before sending it to the recipient bank. And behind the transaction, the funds have to be verified as well by the PAP system because there's no physical movement of funds. So what happens is the member banks have to maintain a deposit or arrangements that allow for payments to be credited to the recipient's bank, and the recipient bank will then continue to hold those funds there for its other transactions. So money doesn't move per se, but the accounts are debited and credited to allow the beneficiaries to receive funds. So in terms of security, let me say I'm not too
yeah.
familiar with the exact
They are
security
not.
details.
Yeah,
Yes,
those are technical backend things. Now,
yes,
there is
yes.
a good question from Irene Karanja. I find payments to Nigeria especially very difficult. Does opening
Mm.
an account with a West African affiliate bank in Kenya make it easier, e.g., GT Bank or Echo?
Mm, okay. There are certain things that could make opening of accounts complicated, especially for African countries. One of the reasons is African countries are keen to protect their foreign reserves and regulate the activities that happen uh, outside of their borders. I am also aware there are areas such as even Ethiopia, which are even probably more difficult because they are not that easy to open foreign banks. They don't have that many foreign banks within the economy. And possibly what I would say is when you look at what complicates uh, transactions is the lack of detail. So if you're doing a transaction with a party in Nigeria, you'd need to have proper contracts showing what the transaction is all about. You may also need to show what is the source of your money. Where did you get your money from? If it's from businesses, you'd need to show for example, your books of accounts that confirm that you do actually do business and the money that you're transacting with is legitimate money. It's the anti-money laundering, or what banks like call AML space, is becoming very complex, and a lot of the banks, even globally, find themselves playing catch up to the challenges they face in money laundering. So these banks probably just want to be sure that they're doing business the right way, because there are very heavy penalties for are found to have flouted rules and end up having fraudulent transactions. This impacts seriously on the operation. If you look at some of these fines, they run into millions of dollars, and it can be crippling for a small bank. And to answer your question, is it easier to do transactions with banks like GT or Echo? It possibly could be, because how I look at it is, if you have an account in Kenya with these two banks and your recipient has an account as well with one of those, they already have know your customer or KYC documents. So they would then need to run a shorter trail, which is just to confirm that the funds are for a legitimate purpose. You have the invoices, and the other party on the other side has actually supplied services or is supposed to supply, and this is within their line of business. But it's still important to note that it doesn't eliminate the local rules for the central banks in that area or region, or the laws of the particular jurisdiction of that bank to meet the requirements.
Okay, I just learned, by the way, about that Ethiopian problem last week, that it's almost impossible to get money being paid from Ethiopia, and many people who've rushed there end up you have no way of having the money reaching your pocket or reaching your bank. I didn't know about that. Yeah.
With Ethiopia, you need approval from the central bank before the money can be sent out. So especially dollars, they have to be signed off. We used to have, I am told, when probably I was not near anywhere banking as a small boy, Kenya used to have the same. But it's one of the reasons the country has really grown, because we've liberated the trade in foreign currencies, but there is still, those restrictions still exist in a number of African countries. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So maybe another thing along this is when I want to make a payment, say to South Africa or to Uganda, the person I'm paying there just needs to tell me the amount in their currency, and then
Yes,
that particular bit, it is my bank that will be able to now translate to me and tell me this is the amount you need to pay, right?
correct. Yes. Yes.
Okay.
So you need to tell your bank how much you'd like the recipient to receive,
Mhm.
and they will then calculate for you how much you need in Kenya shilling to complete the transaction. So it's easier for the beneficiary and it's easier for you, and the banks do all the heavy lifting between there. And there is no likelihood of losing money. Usually, how transactions happen, and this is not to look down upon mobile transfers. Unlike mobile transfers where you can send money to the wrong number, with transfers like EAPS, PAPS, RTGS, there is a beneficiary name and account number. And it's usually very difficult, by eliminating one digit or getting one digit wrong, that there will be a likelihood that such an account exists. The way banks are set up is such small typographic errors may not result in an existence of another account with those details, the account and the name and all that. So there's those verifications that happen. Uh, and especially for large transactions. Say you're sending 50 million, your bank will receive the money, but may take a little longer to credit you. Just as they check, they will probably not tell you, but they're just checking, is this amount usual? Maybe you've been receiving 10,000, 20,000, then suddenly there's 50 million. They'll give you a call. Yes.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. The other thing is, I just hope, or we just hope that the charges will be reasonable, so that if, for example, somebody is sending to me maybe $100, it's not going to cost like 50% of of the
Of
value.
the amount.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I
Because
think
sometimes it's
what I've
the cost
seen,
that is barring trade. Yeah.
yes, what I've seen is RTGSs and the one for East Africa are at about 500, compared to if you were sending dollars to Uganda, most banks will charge you about 2,000. So there is also a cost saving for using the local currency. The main reason is when you use platforms like Swift, there's sometimes more than just two banks or three banks behind the scenes, and they are all charging, including the recipient also could be charged for the transfer.
Mm.
Yeah. So definitely what I think is PAPS is going to likely the KCB one just started. I've not seen the tariff guide for that, but I don't expect it will be at the same level as the Swift, which is between $20 to $30 per transaction. It will probably be much lower than that.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I think that makes sense, and hopefully there will be that integration to mobile payment where if somebody can send using Wave from US, from wherever, it should be possible for intra-African, so that we are able to make payments real time more efficiently, and that will be able to help a lot. Because as it stands, most times people are limited. I have people who
Yeah.
want to pay, for example, from South Africa, and we keep looking for options. We go to PayPal, you see, and all that means some bottleneck. And by the end of the day, when it reaches PayPal, getting it from PayPal to the bank and then having that money is another drama. So this would be a very, very helpful initiative, even if you need some work and somebody is paying you from another corner of the world, of Africa. It would be quite a welcome idea. Good. I don't think there is any
Yeah.
other question that is left, uh, unless somebody proves me otherwise. Noel, maybe we can move to the next level.
Mm. And
Uganda.
Otieno Computer, you can transfer directly from PayPal to your M-Pesa. You don't have to
Yeah,
send.
no, it depends if the M-Pesa is in the name of
The
the company,
PayPal.
not the bank, or what. Yeah. Somebody
Oh,
has
yeah.
put some question there. I don't know. My name is Alex from Uganda. What is the best way to receive payments as small as 10 USD for my
Yeah.
services?
Yeah. Uh, I've seen that. I think if you were to ask me about a payment in USD, I would probably recommend that is in a local currency. The challenge with sending USD will then require a platform such as Swift if it's in banking. Otherwise, there are other options probably. For example, the other channels people send dollars with from even Dubai and the likes, they could probably do that. But the the way African countries are looking at this is to promote use of local currencies so that it's cheaper.
Okay, thank you so much. I really do not think there are any more questions. I don't think there are any more questions. And apart from that, if you have any question, I'm sure you can reach out to the speaker of the day. He is going to give us his contacts, and then you can ask all the other questions that you have. So I call upon Professor to give the vote of thanks. Professor Melvin. Not Professor Hamo, Professor Melvin. Professor, where are you?
Another Professor Ohamu.
Thank you very much, Lady Noel, for addressing me by my proper name. What I'd like to say is, on behalf of Power Monday, we're really grateful to Mr. Washira for breaking down PAPs to us so well. And we're also grateful to AfCFTA and generally the Afreximbank and this Pan-African move to simplify trade in goods and services across this continent. I want to thank Mr. Washira for breaking it down so well. And my take home is that it's going to become easier and cheaper for us to trade across this continent. Now, behind the scenes, I want to thank Lady Noel for moderating this session. I want to thank Antonia Mutunga, Dan Olale, and OPP for putting up this show week after week and doing it so well that we are beginning to attract participants from across the continent and indeed across the globe. And with those few remarks, let me hand you back to Lady Noel.
Professor Melvin, not Hamo.